It's no secret. It's plain to see. I love you. And you love me. It's no secret. You know it's true. You love me. And I love you. The only time we seem to meet is in the middle of the night. Only then can I feel your heartbeat. Till something's not right. Together I see you and me, always and all time. But not everyone would agree. To them it's a crime. It's no secret. It's plain to see.
Welcome everyone to Crypto Defined for September 8th, 2022. My name is Kathy Chu, and I'm your host for this bi-monthly interview series where we look at the innovators, the disruptors, and the skeptics of the now $1 trillion crypto industry. Our subject this week is the Merge, the highly anticipated event that's happening at the end of next week that's been billed as the most important technology upgrade in the history of the crypto industry. The merge is happening to Ethereum, the most used blockchain in crypto, with digital assets, apps, and smart contracts built on the chain. Ether, the second largest cryptocurrency, is also powered by Ethereum, and Ether has a market cap of $195.4 billion. We are lucky enough to have two guests today. Our first guest today on Crypto Defined is Alex Vandesand, who helped launch Ethereum, the first Ethereum wallet and Web3 browser. Alex is known by his online moniker AVSA, if I pronounced that correctly, Alex, and has a role in history as one of the white hat hackers who helped recover funds from the DAO hack of 2016 that nearly took down the Ethereum blockchain. If you haven't read about it, part of Ethereum history that you definitely should read about, it's in Laura Shin's book and in a couple of other places. Alex used to be part of the Ethereum Foundation, but today he's speaking only as an active member of the Ethereum community and as a designer. Our second guest is David Shuttleworth. He's a DeFi economist for ConsenSys, a blockchain company that develops apps on the Ethereum blockchain. David leads the development of NFTs and tokens for ConsenSys and is considered an expert on the merge. You can find more about them in our recap after the show ends in the next few days on truthdao.xyz. Please also join our Discord and Telegram communities for more information. Thank you, Alex and David. Thank you for being with us today. I greatly appreciate your time, and there's a lot of brain power in the metaverse today.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Thank you
Hi,
so
Katie.
much.
Hi, David.
Very nice to meet, Alex. We haven't met before, but you're a legend. It's good to meet.
Oh, come
And
on.
Alex and David, this is a very informal conversation. So even if I direct a question at Alex and David, you want to answer, please go ahead and jump in and vice versa, because I think this is important. It's you both come from different viewpoints and different histories, and I think it's very valuable to have both of your insights, and that's why I'm so pleased to have you both here today. So let's talk bigger picture first. People say the merge could be one of the most important events in crypto's history. Let's talk about why. Alex, you were part of Ethereum Classic. why is the transition that's happening next week? Why is it considered such a big deal?
Well, first of all, I wasn't part of Ethereum Classic as I was part of the Ethereum Classic ecosystem or anything. I was
Okay.
part of. I was there when I saw Ethereum Classic emerge, right? I wouldn't consider to be myself part of that community. Uh, I honestly, I think that the merge is important first and foremost because it really signals that Ethereum it has been we have been dedicated to the change for the past 8 years. It has defined Ethereum as we wanted to evolve. Uh, we have been saying that we wanted to evolve beyond proof of work since we launched the network, and I think it really talks about the commitment to that project. That after 8 years, I think we are finally there. I think we are finally at a point in which the our solution to proof of stake is good enough that it can be just launched and be live, and just to be able to change that on the fly while the ecosystem is live is such an incredible accomplishment in my opinion.
Okay. And David, you and I talked about this a little this week. I mean, there are a few important reasons why the merge is considered so significant. One being possibly decentralization, the other being energy savings. Could you talk a little bit about why these are important to the future of Ethereum?
Yeah, I think in general, like right now, all proof of work, not just Ethereum, but it's not very environmentally conscious. And I think these days, especially you see around the globe, there's all sorts of, energy crises going on. And I think that a shift toward proof of stake, essentially makes it, um, you know, super clean, super efficient, super green. It reduces emissions by something like 95 or 99%, depending on what estimate you look at. So I think that it's important not only for the Ethereum ecosystem, but considering how big and how large of a role Ethereum plays throughout the entire Web3 space. It's a good first step for the broader community as well. So I think that like Alex mentioned, it's something that's been in the works, what seems like forever now, and I think we're really close. But yeah, it's a step in the right direction, I think.
And it's supposedly happening next week, and both of you feel that it still seems to be on track, correct? So nothing's going to derail it at this point. I think Vitalik had said the 13th through the 15th, I believe. So we are going through with this because the Bellatrix, I guess the final step has been passed, and this is going to happen.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think with Bellatrix, yeah, there were a few hiccups, but I don't think it was anything like super significant. I think it was just the fact that some of the validate some of the tooling didn't upgrade, but I don't think it was anything super alarming. But
Okay. So one more question, because I think it's very important for people to understand the big picture of why this is important. I mean, for people out there who have heard of the merge, they've heard of the term maybe triple halvening, right? There are a few different terms that have been used to describe this transition. Um, why, though, is it so important? I mean, one of the goals of the merge is to make Ethereum the base layer for the internet, correct? So what does that mean exactly? And what kind of applications and innovations can people expect that aren't there yet? I mean, for someone who doesn't know the merge, why? Why should they care? And that's a question
Well,
directed to both of you.
I think that like David mentioned a little bit the energy impact, and I think that shouldn't be ignored because I think one of the things that changed in the past, let's say 5 years, from like crypto now to crypto 4 or 5 years ago, is that we've migrated into from relative obscurity to having active naysayers and people actually complaining. And I think from people that are doing active opposition for crypto. And I would say that a lot of that comes from wastefulness comes from comes from this narrative that crypto is basically burning the rainforest just to create a casino, right? Uh, and 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 I think with that reduction, even if you like, maybe you're not, maybe if you're still a casino, we are not burning the rainforest for that, right? And I think it's still very important to do that. And with the change, I would say that since Bitcoin, you can't really have Bitcoin isn't a platform. You can't really like do significantly NFTs or smart contracts on top of it. It would mean that basically like the major all the major platforms in which you can build something or have migrated or proof of stake, and I think that's very important.
Okay. David, did you want to add anything on that point?
Yeah, and I think real quick just on there, it doesn't currently, you can light a small city up with the amount of resources that are burned under proof of work to, mint a bunch of NFTs, and we're getting away from that. And obviously, the energy consumption and energy efficiency is like a huge thing, but also, I think at the end of the day, just the way that proof of work kind of shakes up, where you have to have not only the technical wherewithal to run sophisticated mining equipment, but you also have the capital to actually own the land or own the buildings and own the machinery and hire personnel to run them. Proof of stake kind of removes that, where it's like if you have Ethereum, you can participate not only in the network, but you can secure the network as well. And I think that's like the whole democratization of participation and securing the network, I think, is super, super important. And I think just the way, again, that mining pools kind of shake up, where you're left with just like very dominant entities kind of dictating, how the network moves and how the network, how it settles transactions. You still might get some of that with proof of work, but literally anyone with Ethereum can participate, whether it's staking and running your own validator or participating in professional or some of the liquid staking derivatives. You can participate, and you're not there's more inclusion, I think, which I think it's a very important factor.
Now that's a very good point, David. Let's talk about that for a little bit. You talked about the democratization of, more people will be able to participate, right? You don't need this huge mining power. You can participate by staking. And that's also why some people say that the proof of stake model is more decentralized. Now, there's also the opposite side of this, though. Some people say that when you move to the proof of stake model, it can actually become more centralized. And some critics of this transition talk about how there's more centralization with proof of stake because of the liquid staking. There's Lido Finance and others, I think, have a substantial part of the liquid staked ether. So how do you both think about this picture? Because depending on what source you read or who you listen to, it's either more decentralized or it's actually less decentralized, right? So it's both.
Well, it might depend, and right now we are talking about theory, and I believe it will lead to a more democratic access and more decentralized future for Ethereum, mainly because it's a lot easier to have access to Ether, and anyone with access to Ether and access to the internet can stake. While before, in order to mine, you do need to have access to special equipment. You need to have access to a large amount of cheap energy, and it's actually a lot easier to detect when someone is using its mining due to the energy costs, right? And but most importantly, I think just the fact that merge is happening does mean that we are able to go out there and just update and change and improve the protocol, right? I think this is such a great positive signal, because it does mean that our goal is to have a more decentralized and democratized access to Ethereum. And if the merge, if we will need to change something else, we are or the path is clear. We can change the protocol. It's not like it's not static. We can still go out there and change things.
Right. Actually, that's a very good point, Alex. I'm hearing a little background feedback, by the way. I don't know if you both are, but for some reason I'm hearing some background feedback. But that's a good point, Alex. Even if things aren't perfect at first, your point is that it can be improved on. So you don't need to expect perfection the minute that this transition happens from proof of work to proof of stake, correct? Alex, can you hear me?
Oh,
Right.
hi. Yeah,
Okay, perfect. Perfect.
I have some work happening on both like the
Oh,
floor
is that
below
why
me
we
and above. That's probably
got
there's
it.
some
So
construction here.
maybe in between, that's a good idea. Maybe in between we can just mute.
Yeah, but I definitely agree with you.
Okay.
And
Okay,
I just
fantastic.
real quick, if I could just add about kind of like the democratization. I think, look, at the end of the day, proof of stake, just like proof of work, might shake out to be kind of like a natural monopoly, where you're going to have a set of large stakers that are going to run. They're going to be responsible for running the validators, because it does involve sort of like a non-trivial expertise around a validator. It's not sort of a passive way where you can just, hey, I'll just put 32 Ethereum up, and then all of a sudden, like the validator magically runs. You have to be, performant. You have to be constantly upgrading. You have to be online. But I think that the key takeaway there is that, one, you're going to have professional institutions that are super visible. Like you're going to have, Lido and Coinbase and Kraken, these large exchanges that they're going to be the ones who kind of run these professional staking services. And at any time, if a participant thinks that these entities aren't like kind of holding up to the end of the bargain or acting maliciously, you can withdraw your stake. So with mining, it's not that simple, right? If you own the mining, like if I hold Bitcoin, there's nothing I can really do about the Bitcoin miners. But in terms of with proof of stake, anytime I don't, if I'm delegating my stake to any validator in the network, and I don't think they're doing a good job, I can just remove my stake and go somewhere else. So I think it still gives participants that kind of level of autonomy that isn't present within proof of work. So I think that's like a super important distinction.
Okay, so David, you're not so much worried about the centralized aspect of, Lido Finance and others have so much of this liquid staked ETH, because your point is you could withdraw if you're not happy, you can do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the existential. I think we would kind of be fools not to be suspicious of it. But I think that the existential threat will be there. But I think that there is a solution to it, right? It's at the end of the day, you can take your stake out, and with Lido and liquid staking derivatives, there's the element of like liquidity that might play like a role in the speed at which you can unstake. But at the end of the day, yes, if everyone leaves Lido and they don't think that Lido is acting with integrity, Lido will, kind of cease to function as they do. But not to say they're acting maliciously now, just theoretically.
Okay, fair enough. So besides saving energy and the decentralization, one of the benefits is supposed to be greater security with the merge, correct? So it'll be harder to launch a 51% attack on Ethereum, as has happened a few times in the previous years. Alex, I wanted to go to you for a second. Alex, the attack in 2016 was on the DAO, which was built using a smart contract. I know it was a very specific circumstance where the coding allowed the hacker to withdraw funds, I believe, before the balance was actually deducted. So do you worry, though, that attacks similar to this could happen to projects using the blockchain? I understand the overall point of there's more security with a 51% attack. It will be more expensive for someone to launch an attack. But in general, do you think proof of stake is more secure than proof of work for Ethereum? And will it be harder for people to launch similar attacks like what happened on projects in 2016 that you were a part of?
I think the comparison with the DAO is interesting because, like, we've actually seen, in terms of just pure money, thefts much larger than the DAO. We've seen like bugs with with smart contracts that have been much larger than the DAO, and there wasn't a copy and like like a lot of people say, oh, like the DAO opened a precedent, and a lot of projects that this could happen again. We've already seen that. I don't think this will ever happen again, because we've seen multiple projects that had similar, like much larger thefts or hacks, and 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 to be honest, and looking back, I don't even know if the for DAO hard fork was really necessary. I think that like with the just looking back, I think we like Ethereum could have survived the like not doing the hard fork, and probably all the issues that we arise from it, all the like the issues with like Ethereum Classic and the chain split could probably didn't like weren't worth it, right? So I don't think the hard fork needed to happen, and I don't think something like that will ever happen again. But it did feature a lot, like some very important lessons that like we have learned to this day.
Alex, just go back for 10 seconds. So in terms of, for people who aren't aware of what happened, could you just catch them up? So you don't think the hard fork needed to happen. If I remember correctly, the hacker in some senses was bluffing about his capabilities. And so a hard fork was instituted, and the Ethereum community felt that that was only choice. But catch people up a little for those who don't know what's going on. Why was a hard fork done exactly, and why don't you think this will happen again?
So, first of all, interesting. Like, one of the reasons that the hard fork was done was precisely because it could be done. Because so what happened is that there was a bug in the code, money was stolen. But unlike most other hacks, the money that was stolen was locked into an address where the the dark hacker couldn't actually like move that address, right? In most cases, if you try to do hard fork to get money back, the bad guy, the hacker, can just like move the money a few seconds before you do execute the hard fork, and then like the hard fork is useless. And so it was a very specific circumstances in which the money was locked. Everyone knew where the money was. The money couldn't be moved, and people thought that Ethereum was early enough that, and the amount of Ether in terms of just Ether total, not in our amount of dollars total, was significant enough that it was worth it. But honestly, looking back, I'm not sure it was. But I think we did learn a lot about crypto governance, right? I think that a lot of, I would say that if the Ethereum Classic hard fork never happened, we would not see all the, let's say, Bitcoin hard forks happening, because it did taught us about what happens when a chain splits, and what happens when we receive a second token, and what happens like back then we thought like the common knowledge was that if a chain splits, one of the chains will die and the other will survive. And we learned this is not true, right? It's possible that both chains will survive. That's why we saw a lot of like later Bitcoin forks surviving, and that's probably one of the reasons that if people want to like launch a new Ethereum proof of work, that probably will survive in some form, even if it's not big enough.
And interesting you mentioned that there are supporters of Ethereum of keeping of a hard fork on Ethereum, so keeping a proof of work status. And David and Alex, I think we talked about this. One of the guests we had last week, Justin Sun, had talked about how he's really supporting a hard fork, even though he knows that there will be such energy savings, and he supported proof of stake before, but he's supporting a hard fork for Ethereum because he thinks that it is actually more secure and there's more privacy with proof of work. So any thoughts of that? on that. You don't have to weigh in on that if you don't want to. But David, if you want to weigh in, I think you and I talked about this a
Yeah,
little.
I,
Feel free.
I would just say that Justin's probably trying to play some 4D chess. But I think in general, I would say that proof of stake, for some of the reasons we mentioned before, is more secure. And I think that we'll see through the actual provision of it. But we'll see. I think that there probably will be some sort of variant. Like you will see that, especially right on from the merge. Well, you will see proof of work, rather some form of an airdrop or an actual hard fork. You will see that, but if people actually build on it, like you're going to still have miners they're still in business. They still have to kind of pay bills and make ends meet, so they're probably going to participate while they can. But the question is, like, are end users and institutions going to use it? And my guess is probably not.
And you think it is more secure. So could you talk about that a little bit, David? I believe the reason why it's more secure is because it's more costly to launch an attack, right? A 51% attack, which basically taking over enough of the nodes of the blockchain. Is it more costly? And if so, what are the other aspects that make it more secure?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, that's the main benefit, is that it becomes exceedingly expensive, especially as the success of the network. As the price of Ethereum increases, it becomes almost exponentially more expensive to attack the network. The other thing too is, if you can try to attack it not just through 51% attacks, but you could try to send incorrect data and try to mess with blocks and basically have a very kind of rogue validator. But the problem is that others are going to detect you. They have an incentive to detect you, and you're going to lose your money. Like, you're going to get slashed. So I think that keeps a lot of the other attack vectors kind of at bay, because it's basically you lose your bond. There's hard money on the line, and I don't think people are going to be willing to risk that for at a small chance of success at a random attack.
Okay. Now, this question came in from our Discord community for both of you. So could the merge technically fail? And if so, what are the implications? And I'm not sure this is fail is subjective, right? And as Alex had pointed out, there are things that can be improved on. It's not like once this merge happens, it's static and that's it. Whatever happens at that moment goes, right? So there are things that could be improved on. But the question was, could the merge fail? And if so, what are the implications?
I can go real quick. I would just say, aside from the obvious, there could be a coding error or something like that, or maybe a bunch of nodes go offline and it fails in that regard. Like, it's a sort of a technical or coding error, hardware failure. But to me, I think one angle that a lot of folks aren't talking about is that kind of, the code and the actual implementation goes through, but then in practice it fails. And the way, to me, that I think that it could fail is that, look, we talked about how there's economies of scale in both sides of staking, proof of stake or proof of work. But with proof of stake, if we end up having, your Krakens, your Coinbases, and maybe even your Goldman Sachs or Googles, whoever it might be, they run the lion's share of validators. One of the risks, to me, maybe it's an existential risk, is censorship. We've seen that with Tornado Cash, where it's like, hey, these addresses are blacklisted. If I happen to have an address that gets blacklisted, and Alex is running a node and he has my transaction, is he at the behest of the law to kind of block that block from happening? So to me, it's more about, if it shapes up to be kind of large entities and corporations running the validators and securing the network, not that they do it maliciously, but are they at the behest of kind of SEC or other regulatory powers that kind of prevent them from processing transactions?
That's a really good point. Alex, did you want to weigh in on this?
So first, I would like to answer David. I think David is just being too generous on Justin on the earlier point. I don't think he's playing 4D chess. I think the only game he's playing is one which he keeps getting attention to himself. I think it's quite hypocritical for him to defend proof of work when his own like chain is not based on proof of work, right? I think there is. I see very few reasons to support a proof of work chain on Ethereum. One of the facts being that there is already a proof of work chain called Ethereum Classic that will still be alive. And if people are supporting it, is because they are hoping that whatever chain comes out of it, FPO or something, will be like significant enough that their bags will like they be able to sell their bags and make a turn on that. And I think because to be honest, it doesn't take that much to be like a top 100 cryptocurrency, right? You can be like a top 100 cryptocurrency and probably be worth $1 billion, unfortunately, and still like make money, even if it's like a dead project that doesn't really have any incentive. But it's going to be interesting to watch the proof of work Ethereum, even if it's just to see what would happen with all the DeFi when everything crashes, right? What happens to DAI in like what happens to RAI, what happens to DAI, whatever happens to all the like Uniswap in that extreme condition. Like I think we're gonna learn a lot from just watching like Ethereum proof of work crash and burn in a sense, right? I do think yes, as David said, it's the merge can fail not only on technically in the sense that the merge for some reason did not work, but the merge can fail in the sense that our goals have not been met, right? Oh, we have not reached. It's not easier to stake Ether. It's not more democratic, things like that. And I worry about Lighter Finance in the same way that I worry about Coinbase having too much of concentration of powers in the ecosystem. And I think we should just focus on each individual problem as they come, right? And I think we after the merge we should take a look back and say, okay, what is happening with the ecosystem and how is that is how easy it is to do home staking and what can we do to improve staking at home to prevent having like a few validators that are able to sense.
Now, I wish I had Justin Sun here to debate with two of you. The reason why I thought that his comments were very interesting last week is, as you mentioned, Alex, that's true. The Tron runs on a proof of stake system. So, the fact that he's supporting a hard fork and now supporting proof of work was very interesting thoughts, and was an interesting thought for him in terms of, why are you now supporting proof of work? But in any case, thank you for your thoughts on that. So one other thing I wanted to ask both of you is, Vitalik Buterin has said that the merge will make the Ethereum blockchain I think he said about 55% complete. Okay. So what do you take that to mean? I think from someone watching from the outside, it shows that there's a lot more progress. This is not the end point, right? As Alex has pointed out a few times, and David, you've pointed out, this is just a step along the path of the Ethereum blockchain. So what does that mean, Alex and David? And what do you think is in Ethereum's future to take it to 80% to 90%? Alex, for you, in terms of design, I'd love to hear from you on that. And David, I'd love to hear from you about what you see coming in the future.
First of all, I wouldn't take those numbers like the Vitalik trolls like too seriously. They are just like estimates that
Right.
he's using as a metaphor. It's not actually a number of something that we
Right. And
reach.
there's no way to know if it's 55% or 60%, right? But I think the
Yeah,
idea is that this is not the completion of the journey. So what do you think about that idea,
I
Alex?
think his main point is that Ethereum should change, should evolve, but we should at some point reach a stabilization point in which the amount of drastic changes that are done on the network are reduced. And I think what he means by we are at 55%, it really means that most of the big changes that we wanted to do with the network are probably behind us, right? And like most of the stuff that is ahead of us is smaller and can be done. I think that's how I interpret the 55%, not a specific number, but just saying like most of the work is behind us, not ahead of us. And I think yes, while Ethereum until Ethereum doesn't properly scale, until it can't be like until we can't like use it with like tons of users and we solve a lot of like the UI issues, I think the work is not done, right? And I think a lot of it needs to be done, and a lot of that relates to like scaling Ethereum as a whole, right? I think a lot of the even like UI like experience problems, UI problems come from scaling Ethereum, in my opinion.
David, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I agree. I think that I think a lot of the work is kind of behind us, how Alex mentioned, but I think that at the end of the day, Ethereum is just kind of like that last step of getting all the base layer of like work done before they can make the more, I guess, the changes that actually affect kind of the UI, the UX, and that's mainly sharding and some of the throughput. Because at the end of the day, Ethereum is still going to be relatively expensive to use. Like gas is still going to be relatively expensive. Performance isn't going to be as performant as other L1s, and that's fine. There's L2s kind of do a lot of that legwork for us. But I think that in kind of the next part of the roadmap, Ethereum becomes way more optimal as sharding's enabled, and now you can handle thousands and thousands of transactions per second, and even some of the lightweight clients that are being hinted at, where a node doesn't have to know the entire history of the chain in order to participate. Where you could even have something like mobile staking, where you like a mobile phone is sufficient to participate in like staking. Like I don't know how like super realistic they are in the near future, but like those sorts of ideas I think are really, really important. And I think kind of go back into like how Alex mentioned about the UI, the UX. Like if staking isn't very easy and people can't easily participate through like UI and UX design, then the goal kind of failed. But I think those sort of novel approaches where you can literally use your phone's computing power to somehow participate or run like a lightweight client, I think are really, really impactful, but are still part of the roadmap ahead.
Okay, great. And my last question for both of you, there is just so much to unpack with this merge and with whether this becomes deflationary with the energy costs. And as you mentioned, David, this merge does not solve all problems. I think that's a very good point. It's not going to solve all the problems. And as Alex mentioned, this could be improved on. So it's not a static transition. We can keep improving on it. So the question for both of you, my last question for both of you on this is, what is one important thing, not necessarily the most important thing, but what is one important thing that you think people should know about the merge that maybe people misunderstand, or that you think is maybe not talked about enough? We've talked about some of the things, but definitely there's a lot out there, and I think for some people it's a lot to unpack. So Alex, if we could start with you, what is one important thing that you think people should know about the merge and should just keep an eye on at going forward?
That's a hard question. Like, well, what is the thing that people like don't know that they should know? I think that's a very interesting question. I would say is that despite it being a big change, this is not like a radical shift for Ethereum. I think proof of stake is clearly on the Ethereum white paper. Like we believed that we'll be launching a proof of stake a few months or a few years just after the main network was launched, right? And I think if we took like 8 years instead of one, it's mostly because this was a big research process in which people were like, "Oh, look, we found issues here, and we want to fix it, and we want to test it." And it was a part of a long process, and but it was a process that was the plan since the beginning.
Right. And Alex has been tested for about 2 years before this merge happened, correct? Because the beacon chain, which has been moved there, where the merge is happening with, I think they've been testing that in parallel for 1.5 to 2 years to make sure there are no bugs and that it can proceed smoothly. So it's not like
Exactly.
talk about 8 years, the 8 years of planning and also 2 years of actual testing, correct?
Yes, exactly. It's such an incredible like I think the developers who've worked on it, like it's such an incredible piece of engineering because it's like so many teams working on so many different clients. There are like the consensus client, there are execution clients, and everyone needs to be working like at the same time on that. And I think it's really incredible.
David, how about you?
Yeah, and I would just add like one final thought about that is like, yeah, it's kind of hard to say what people don't know, but in general, I think that again, it goes back to the relative cost and performance of Ethereum. Like you see a lot of, especially in the earlier days of like some of the proverbial Ethereum killers, they would come out and they would advertise their throughput, like, hey, we do 100,000 TPS, and we do it at 1,000th of a cent. You're not going to get that, but I think that's fine. I think it's go in there with the expectation, like you go in there with tempered expectations. But the key takeaway is that it's a step in the right direction, and it's a step of a few more super important upgrades that are come to make Ethereum way more scalable, way more efficient, and more optimal. And at the end of the day, proof of stake allows it to function as that transaction layer that doesn't go offline, and that you can send transactions, they don't get reverted. So I think that it's, again, a step in the right direction. I think it's really exciting stuff.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Alex Vandesand and David Shuttleworth of ConsenSys. Alex is on Twitter at AVSA, AVSA. Is it AVSA.eth or just AVSA? I found you on both, Alex. So
Yeah, I'm both, right?
you're both,
It's
right?
AVSA.
You can find them both.
AVSA is just made it's just the handle, and AVSA.if is the name.
Fantastic. And David is at mega_fund, and he puts out some interesting analysis about Ethereum and about other DeFi matters, and as an economist at ConsenSys. Thank you so much for being here both. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you for your insight.
Awesome. Thanks for
Thank you.
having
Bye,
us.
Katie.
Take
Thank you
care.
again.
Bye.
We'll have a recap on Alex Vandesand and David Shuttleworth and their comments in the next few days. Thank you for watching.
Hello? Yeah, that worked out.